If you clicked on this video, you're probably interested in game development, making your dream game, or maybe you're already on that journey. Well, I'm here to tell you to stop. Please stop while you can, get out, it's too late for me, but you can still make it. Just kidding. No, but seriously, what is the reality of indie game development, specifically solo game development? Coming from me, who about 3 years ago was on the outside, similar to you looking in, and then dove headfirst into the single hobby, besides playing actual video games, that has eaten up the most amount of my time. I've been working on my indie roguelike deck builder about wizards called Castlemancer, which you should definitely wishlist on Steam for roughly the last year. And there's been lots of ups and downs. In a phrase, building a game is hard, but it's also really fun. Let's dive a little deeper into that. Now, if you're seriously interested in game development, I think it's safe to assume that you're a fan of video games as well. And I didn't really realize how complex game development actually is, and that's coming from someone who specifically studied mathematics and computer science in college. But let's walk through the hypothetical scenario of you or me starting down the indie game development journey. And this is totally not to be disparaging, I'm just trying to be realistic here. So let's set the scene. You're playing Stardew Valley and you heard that its solo developer made something like $300 million over 6 years, completely as a solo developer. And you're like, hey, I like money. I'd like to drive a Ferrari. I like video games, and this isn't Call of Duty, it's just a pixel art farming sim. Why can't I build something like that? The first question you'll likely have is, okay, well, how do I start? And there's one very important question you need to begin with. Are you a programmer, an artist, both, or neither? If you're both, congrats, that's a great place to start. If you're either a programmer or an artist, how will you become the other? For me, I was a programmer, but a terrible artist. So I opted to pay artists on places like itch.io, the Unity Asset Store, Fiverr, and even Instagram for some art assets for the game. Alternatively, you can learn how to create and animate pixel art, but that would probably double your development time, but does give you more creative freedom. And likewise, if you're an artist, you can try to leverage less code-intensive game engines, use ChatGPT, or just straight up try to learn programming. And if you're neither, well, you'll definitely have your hands full. Are you quitting your full-time job to work on this? Do you have a family you need to take care of? Is this a side hobby or just a hustle? The more time you have to dedicate to it, it will obviously be completed faster, but also introduces more risk if the game doesn't perform financially well and you were counting on it to. Eric Barone, the creator of Stardew Valley, spent like 4 years living with his girlfriend making no money in order to dedicate his time completely to the development of Stardew Valley. And alongside that, are you gonna look for a game publisher to help supplement income or help with marketing? Maybe start a Kickstarter or GoFundMe page, or entirely self-funded. Going back to Eric, he eventually worked with the indie game publisher Chucklefish to help publish Stardew Valley. So now that you've got the art and programming knowledge figured out, you have to decide how will you actually build the game. Well, for Stardew Valley, Eric built his own game engine based on the XNA framework, which would definitely make the programming a lot more complex, but ultimately give you much more base level control and customization. Though for this 2D farming sim, you could probably use a game engine like Unity or Godot. But again, that does require some more learning about how to actually use the engine, which is a common theme in this whole journey. So let's say we just choose Unity. So we know what base tool we are using and we are ready to start building. Now comes all the bugs and problems involved in the actual development of the game, but some broad problems we might run into are we using 1632 or 64-bit sprites? What resolution should I base the game on? How will the sprites actually scale based on the origin resolution to smaller or bigger resolutions? Which controllers and platforms are we supporting, etc. Now, those are all more technical problems about how to actually implement features, but then that's when game design really comes into play. Questions like, does this feature add or subtract from the core gameplay loop? Is this feature even fun? Is this feature necessary? Is feature A better or feature B? For example, let's choose the inventory system. You have the art for the inventory ready, you know how to program it and what data structures and algorithms to use, but should the player have a capped inventory? Should there be a weight limit? Should I be able to stack items, or should everything just be individual? Is the inventory also like an action bar like in Terraria or Stardew Valley? What's stored in the inventory and what's not? Do things like quest items and money take up inventory space? What about equipped items? If the player is wearing an item, should it be required to also be in the inventory or just on the player? Is the inventory bag visible on the player? Can I upgrade my inventory, or is it always the same capacity? All of these questions don't really have a correct answer, and really depend on how you envision your game. And from my experience, a lot of these questions are much harder to answer than simply how an inventory system is implemented programmatically or how it looks artistically. After the game design questions comes user feedback. How will you know your game is fun, or if there are bugs you didn't think of? One option is to give it to friends and family, but also that might be biased. You could turn to Reddit or other social media, but that requires a bit more logistics to distribute demo copies and actually get feedback. Now, one thing I haven't really mentioned yet, and that's on purpose, is how will you market your game? If you don't care about the game's financial success, then I guess it doesn't really matter. But assuming you do care about it financially, I've seen a lot of indie games across social medias leave marketing as more of an afterthought. I think there is a belief that if you build a great game, the players will come regardless. And I do think there is some merit to that. But also, there are so many games on Steam, with more being released every single day. And I'm sure there are amazing games that have sold like 50 copies, and it just didn't pick up enough attention at the right time, or it didn't have quite the right look to do well on Steam, or it was released at the same time as another huge game. Whatever the reason is, I still think you have to do some level of marketing even for a good game. And again, this should ultimately be easier for a good game versus marketing a bad game, but where will you begin? Which social medias should you focus on? Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok? And how will you actually create the marketing materials? If you make YouTube videos, that will help with more organic demand growth, but also take way more time from the actual game development. And which distribution platforms should you focus on? Steam is the largest, but also takes a 30% revenue cut from all of your sales. You could do something like itch.io, but that has far less traffic. Or the Epic Game Store that only takes 12% of revenue. I'm skipping some steps, but overall we made it to the end. The game is built, the testers had good feedback, the marketing has been ongoing, everything is coming together. But when is the best time to release the game? Should we release it in between large game releases? But many indie games do that, so there might be more competition in the indie-specific market. If we release on the same day as another big game release, there will be less indie competition, but way more attention on the AAA game with AAA marketing. And then more importantly, how do you measure success? Is it a certain number of copies sold, a revenue target, the overall sentiment of the player reviews? Or maybe we only care about game outlet reviews like IGN. Now, I wanted to create this video not to answer all of these questions, because honestly, I don't know for most of these, but to highlight the reality of the many questions you'll likely run into when creating a video game. And although it's a lot to consider, it's super fun and challenging, and ambitious and time-consuming and rewarding and everything in between. And if you felt the same way when hearing this long-winded hypothetical, then I think you should build your own game too.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you're interested, go wishlist Castlemancer over on Steam. It really helps me out. We do a bad British accent at the end of every video. Let me know what you guys thought, and hopefully I see you in another one. Bye-bye.